a shocking allegation of jury intimidation on day 3 of deliberations in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial as the jury heads home once again for the night. MSNBC looking like complete fools today after the judge banned the liberal network from the courtroom for doing this very stupid thing. Watch.
A person who identified himself as James G. Morrison and who claimed that he was a producer with NBC News stated that he had been instructed by Ms. Bayan in New York to follow the jury bus. He was ticketed for violating a traffic control signal. I have instructed that no one from MSNBC News will be permitted in this building for the duration of this trial. This is a very serious matter.
Smooth move, X-Lax. The MSNBC freelancer who followed the jury bus now getting thrown under the bus. The network releasing a statement claiming the producer never intended to contact or photograph the jurors and saying they regret the incident and will cooperate with authorities. How serious is this, Jesse?
Well, it's serious because he got caught. It's probably a stringer who's trying to land an exclusive for the Today Show. All big networks do that.
Very plausible.
They're just loaded up with cash, and they have a bunch of these people just all over Kenosha right now trying to identify a juror and then get that great access, because that first juror interview is going to be the interview no matter how this thing shakes out. But the fact that he ran a red light while he was tailing the jury, I mean, that is a dangerous traffic situation, and you don't want to endanger any of the jurors. So that's why it was so serious. But just in the beginning of this thing, the way they misreported the Blake thing, sparked the riots, then had the MSNBC reporter outside saying mostly peaceful with the flames shooting up the sky, and then just smearing this defendant as a white supremacist and now endangering the lives of the jury. If you could just take MSNBC out of this entire last year in Kenosha, we would have a much more peaceful and safer place.
Interesting. Now, Geraldo,
yes, Kennedy,
what is going on with the jury? Because obviously they're on day 3 of their deliberation. They have gone home for the day. We understand that one of the jurors has asked to take the instructions home with them.
How sweet.
So tell me what could possibly be going on here. What are the different scenarios?
Say, Bob, what do you think of this? What should I do? Well, Sarah, I don't know. I don't know, obviously. My surmise is that things are not going well for the defendant. Because if they were on the road to an easy acquittal, I think that would have happened. You've had 24 hours of deliberation. So I think that what's happening is that there is a negotiation, perhaps a compromise, a debate of whether to go with one of the lesser included charges rather than the more serious charges, the first-degree charges. So it could be that. It could be that someone is hung, that someone doesn't know or doesn't want to go along with the majority and is saying, I want an acquittal and you want a conviction, or vice versa. The human dynamic gets more gummy, gets more complicated the longer they are out. Now comes the weekend. The tailing, the stalking by the NBC freelancer, although I'm right, I think Jesse's absolutely right that every network does it. That stalking, I believe, is something that information will get to the jurors. They will know that something happened because they are not sequestered, which to me is a monumental error.
They should have been sequestered.
Thank you. A case of this serious nature, they should have been, at least when they began deliberations, sequestered at that point. So I believe that is one of the many errors in this case. The defense, by moving for a mistrial without prejudice, is basically saying, listen, let's just do this again. And you don't say that when you're ahead, you say that when you're behind.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what the defense is petitioning from the court. How likely are we to see a mistrial declared, and will that happen after there is a verdict?
I think less likely at this point, because the judge has specifically said that he might want to hold an evidence hearing with testimony from experts as to exactly what defense is arguing disadvantaged them, meaning the drone footage, the version of evidence that they got, the version of the video was compressed, it was a smaller volume, and it was less quality. And so the judge essentially wants to ascertain, okay, was this prejudicial? How much so? And he would need to rely on expert testimony to that fact. He's also not heard a rebuttal yet from prosecution to that motion. But to your point, originally the defense was was arguing, and they maintained this argument, that there has been prosecutorial overreach this entire time. They said it's been intentional, in bad faith, it's prejudiced the defendant, and at that point, they were arguing with prejudice, to dismiss it with prejudice, to
Which
prevent...
means he can't be retried,
Correct. And then they changed their minds, which is an interesting turn event, or at least submitted differently. And at the time, they argued, we don't want to give the prosecution another kick at the cat. And I think what's interesting about it is that in the court of public opinion, the but-for analysis is pretty strong, right? It's different than the actual court of justice. But it's interesting because given another shot, prosecution might actually nail it. So I would think defense would, want to do everything within their realm, within their power to prevent that from happening. Keep in mind, final point, that the judge can do a whole host of other remedial items or remedial actions toward the prosecution short of vacating a verdict, right? So he can hold them in contempt, he can reprimand them formally, et cetera, sanctions that don't rise to the level of actually vacating, let's say, a potential acquittal.
Can he take away library cards?
Or conviction.
'Cause that's actually much more serious.
He wouldn't vacate an acquittal.
Yes,
That would be
yes,
double
sorry,
jeopardy.
yes,
But he
exactly.
could vacate a
Conviction.
Ooh, that's exciting. Well, clearly this has been tried in the court of MSNBC. Let's take a look at Joy Reid with her expert legal analysis. Watch.
Greg's favorite.
To the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. It reminded a lot of people of something, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, in which Brett Kavanaugh, who had been accused by a high school friend of committing sexual abuse of her, cried his way through the hearings. In America, there's a thing about both white vigilantism and white tears, particularly male white tears. Really white tears in general, because that's what Karens are, right? They Karen out, and then as soon as they get caught, it's like, Green Waterworks.
Wow. How does she still have a job?
She has gone full-on racist, and I honestly think that the CEO, whoever owns this network, doesn't watch MSNBC, because reverse racism is racism. But she is, I think, because she's getting shellacked in the ratings, she's turned it up a notch. She is a full left-wing crank. If you had the right-wing equivalent of that, mocking weeping blacks and mocking the black tears, you would be out the door before you got to that second word, tears. So this is insane. But you can't just go after MSNBC. You got to throw CNN into the mix. We're realizing that the American media lied to us to protect the rioters. Kenosha was never a protest. It was never a protest. From the moment it started, it was a crime scene, right? And it was a crime scene created because an armed thug was rightfully shot. The whole protest lie was fabricated for one reason and one reason only. It was to use it as another way to emasculate the police. That ended up creating the vacuum, which thuggery exploited, and then drew in a person like Rittenhouse, who came to help because you could see a city that he worked in, where his family lived, was being torched. So it's all back to the media, and I know you're surprised I blame them. But I don't understand Joy Reid. Shouldn't the head of MSNBC pull her aside and say, you do understand you're saying white tears? You are actually...
Could you demonstrate
white tears?
A white tear for us?
No, I can't. Sometimes I will when you're on the show. I do cry quietly in the break after you're on, Geraldo.
Oh, he
Don't cry for me, Argentina.
weeps and whimpers. He is at 6s and 7s with you.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Ahead, liberal comedian Bill Maher out with the big prediction that's going to make Democrats furious. Find out what it is in moments.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.